All right, today we're going to do a quick and dirty episode of what phase of perimenopause am I in? Think of it as a little fun game show, but really the point of me doing this episode today is really to help women who are wondering, am I in perimenopause? Am I not? What stage am I in? It can be really confusing, and I wanted to clear that up today. And, it doesn't really matter what phase you're in, to be completely honest, except for really feeling empowered with what's going on in your body, understanding your symptoms, and it can change the way that you treat your body to feel your best. The whole point of talking about perimenopause is not just to make you scared of what might come in the future. Unfortunately, I think that's one of the side effects of so many more conversations around perimenopause and menopause happening lately. I think it's such a good thing, but I have heard some fear from people who are maybe in their late 30s or 40s who are like, "Oh my gosh, this is what I have to look forward to." And it's like, "Well, not necessarily." And the whole point in my mind of talking about perimenopause and menopause is not just to make you know what's to come, but to really help you understand the process and feel less surprised, yes, and maybe less scared when you are having symptoms, but also to feel really empowered with what you can do to then feel better. It is not something that you have to suffer through and white knuckle like the generations before us have unfortunately had to do. Now we have so many more resources, so many more educated doctors that know how to support women through these phases. So the goal is really for you to feel amazing through these phases, and it absolutely is possible. So that's why we talk about it. Okay, I'm gonna get off my soapbox now and start to go through the stages of the transition into menopause. We call it different names, perimenopause, there are different classifications. Really, what we're talking about is this long transition from reproductive years into menopause. It can be a long process. It can be up to 8 to 10 years, possibly. And what I see is that a lot of women are starting to enter that weight before they even realize it's happening. So again, I think this can be really empowering to talk about. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to share my screen and show you a visual because I think this can be really helpful in in seeing this in our mind. If you are listening, no worries. Don't worry about it. It's not going to make or break anything. But I just wanted to offer this to those who are watching on video. All right. So what you're seeing if you are watching live or what to describe it to those who are listening is just a visual of four boxes side by side talking about the stages of transition into menopause. This was done in a research paper, which I think really beautifully visualized these phases. Previously, in a lot of other studies, they talk about maybe just like one or two phases. In reality, I agree with this view to have four different phases that we're looking at. The first stage, described as -3 or the late reproductive stage, could look relatively normal. You might have regular cycles, maybe slightly irregular cycles. This is where I see some women have a lot lighter periods, maybe slightly shorter cycles in general, but nothing too outrageous. Their hormones may look really normal. Estrogen may be normal. It may be starting to creep up and be high. There may be some symptoms of higher estrogen that could look like breast tenderness or more irritability, more PMS symptoms. Sometimes even heavier periods can go along with that or more painful periods. So there could be some variability here. FSH or follicle stimulating hormone is one that we look at with classification in perimenopause, and it does start to creep up through this transition. And this tends to look normal in this early stage. Ovarian reserve, which is often tested with an AMH level, which is anti-Mullerian hormone. Sometimes it's done with an antral follicle count, more so usually when someone is trying to get pregnant. But ovarian reserve is going to start looking low here. So AMH is going down, depends on the person and the exact age, but this might be about 1 or below. And this is the person that I see come into me who maybe is dealing with a little bit of fatigue or increased weight, feeling just a little bit puffy all over. Again, I described maybe their cycles are starting to change a little bit, but nothing too significant where they're like, oh, absolutely, this is perimenopause. I need some help here. They're like, I just don't feel totally right in my body. things that used to work well for me aren't working as well. That's what I typically see in this first phase of the late reproductive phase. The next phase, we're looking at stage 2. It's called -2. This is the early menopausal transition. This is where we start to see a little bit more noticeable changes. Technically, the definition here is cycles are at least 7 days different than their typical cycle length. Typically is on the shorter side. So say your cycle is usually 27 days. Now all of a sudden your cycle is about 20 days on average. This could also start looking like variable cycle lengths. It's longer than shorter than longer than shorter. Some women start having intercycle bleeding happening that is unusual for them. Symptoms can also look like higher estrogen symptoms again. So it's much more frequent that we're seeing higher estrogen symptoms in this phase. Again, breast tenderness, PMS. I'll also see women with higher histamine symptoms during this phase, interestingly. So they're having new allergies. All of a sudden, they're like, I never had allergies in my life, or I just had very mild seasonal allergies. And now I just feel like my nose is always running, my eyes are always itching. And that's can be a result of higher estrogens during this time. We're also typically seeing lower progesterone in this time. So even if we're ovulating regularly, progesterone is a lot lower. This could also be in that first phase, just to let you know. But especially here, we're typically seeing lower progesterone levels and signs of lower progesterone. So again, that could be PMS. This could have more sleep difficulties, more issues right before their period, maybe having like more spotting or irregular bleeding. FSH, or follicle stimulating hormone, here is again variable. In my practice, I do start to see it creep up in this phase. I think it's consistently, maybe more like 15, maybe getting up to about 20. It's not quite to the place where it's diagnostic technically for perimenopause, but it's definitely starting to creep up a little bit. And LH is on still normal or lower side. That shouldn't be getting too high quite yet. And again, ovarian reserve is pretty low here. It's not to say that someone can't still get pregnant in these phases, but ovarian reserve is definitely lower than we're usually wanting to see it for pregnancy and fertility. Next, we go into the later perimenopause stage, also known as the late menopausal transition phase. This is where cycles are getting real crazy. So typically this is where we're really not ovulating consistently. We're going longer periods of time without having a period. Our cycle length is really long and can be very abnormal, irregular. Symptoms can be very irregular too. This is typically where we're starting to see the quote unquote menopausal symptoms come in really strong. So hot flashes, night sweats, those are symptoms that go along with low estrogen, and that's usually where we're seeing them come in this phase. Estrogen can still be going high though too, and some women will maybe experience one cycle where they're having high estrogen symptoms and one cycle where they're experiencing low estrogen symptoms, because things can become really erratic and wild during this time. Again, progesterone in this phase is really low or non-existent. You might not be ovulating at all or not nearly as consistently. And so progesterone is unfortunately really struggling here and is not present anymore in general. Again, ovarian reserve is low during this phase as well. And then the last phase is early postmenopause. This is where we're technically going into menopause. It's not considered postmenopause quite yet, technically, until you haven't had a period for 12 months. Again, some of this is just silly classification, but this is where I really see women, fully entering that menopause phase where they're really having those low estrogen, low progesterone symptoms consistently, and the period is no longer. Again, there's going to be 12 months of not having a period before you're technically postmenopausal, but when you're in this phase of really not having any period anymore, you're considered menopausal. Again, progesterone, estrogen are going to be low, and FSH is going to be high at this time. This is where we definitely see FSH be elevated and really hit that mark of being at least over 25. And if I didn't say it on that last phase, usually we're seeing it at that phase as well. So FSH over 25, and you're technically in late perimenopause or beyond. Now, I want to note that I've talked about estrogen and progesterone, but testosterone is also a hormone that women have and produce and have really important impacts on their entire body, even though it's talked about like it's just a male hormone. It's a lot higher in men, but it is also very important in women's health and wellness as well. And testosterone can be very variable along all of these phases. So even in that first phase, that late reproductive phase, we can already have low testosterone and be starting to experience symptoms going along with that, like no motivation to work out, a harder time putting on muscle, a harder time with endurance and feeling fatigued during workouts, and having little to no libido. Of course, other things can play into that also, but low testosterone can be very prevalent during all of these phases, really from our 30s, mid 30s on. We can have low DHEA as well, which is an adrenal hormone, a precursor to testosterone also. And that can also be something that really impacts our quality of life and these symptoms that we could be experiencing. So I want to make sure that we're noting that also. So I hope this helps to, again, kind of create some clarity around maybe where you are in perimenopause, the menopausal transition, again, to hopefully empower you with making sense of your symptoms. Okay, I kind of understand why my symptoms have been, this way, they were that way, they've become this way, kind of making sense of it all. And then also understanding, okay, you know, my hormones are at this place, and what can I do to really support that? Again, there are a lot of, holistic and comprehensive things that you can do to take really good care of yourself during these different phases to feel your best. A lot of the lifestyle things go a long way, like making sure you're getting restorative sleep, eating nourishing foods, eating enough food, protein, fiber, all those good things. You can check out my previous podcast episode about that. How to move your body, really making sure that you're moving your body appropriately for the phase that you're in. Again, you could do a lot of changes. I also think that this is really helpful in understanding what phase you're in if you are going to reach for hormone replacement therapy. I talked about this in a previous podcast too with Dr. Mallory. And this, if you are going to be using hormone replacement therapy, this can be really helpful to understand, okay, maybe I do need some support with DHEA or testosterone right off the bat, going to maybe progesterone next in, the late reproductive or early menopausal transition phases, because typically progesterone is really the problem there. You don't necessarily need more estrogen typically during those phases. Once you're in the late menopausal transition or that late perimenopause phase, that's when you probably do need estrogen. If you're really having severe symptoms, your quality of life has gone down the toilet, this is where estrogen supplementation through HRT can be really, really supportive for a lot of women and really decrease symptoms as well as risk factors that can come up during that phase and after. And then, continuing on with those beyond that, again, if that is an appropriate piece of the treatment for you. I hope you found this helpful. Please, please reach out to me if you have any questions about this or any comments. I love to hear from you because it really helps me shape the type of content that I'm putting out to make sure that's really what you want to hear about. That's really important to me. And if you are struggling with any of these symptoms, really understanding where you are, or even getting the testing to know where you are, then please reach out because I'm happy to support you. This is what I do. I love supporting and educating women through this transition and really helping them feel amazing. Because again, it is possible. So please reach out if you need some more support with that.